Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. Have you ever wondered how to grow through grief? We've got some important guests to share with you. Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. I'm Ryan Morris, and as always, I'm here with your host, Nicholas T. Smith, the Gentle Giant. And hey, guess what? I'm joined by some league members as well. Dr. Robinson is here in the house, and Dr. Rachel Smart. We got two doctors. We're going to take you straight to two doctors, not one. We got dose today.
Yeah.
Now, today we might be talking about something that might seem fairly heavy, but we're going to help you grow through it, and that is grief. And good grief, I've been ready for this for a while, so I'm excited to hear from these giants and see where this goes. Nick, do you want to kick us off and get us started here?
Yeah, I love that you said that it was heavy, because grief comes from the root, the etymology of being heavy, heaviness, weightiness. And so as we're going through our Giants journey, there's going to be some times where we have some real heaviness in our lives. And so learning to navigate that is going to be important. It's not so much about what is, sometimes it's about what is not. And so that's where grief comes in, because it helps us to get out of that space. Either of you have any thoughts right off the bat that came up as you heard that?
I think you said it, trying to get out of that space. And I think that, for me and I'm sure for a lot of other individuals, trying to figure out how to get out of that space of despair and anxiety. That's the challenge, I think.
Yeah. Rachel?
Well, we all have those feelings that are going to come up when we go through and process life. And in the path to being a giant, we're going to go through all these hiccups, and we have to know that's the expectations, that it's not smooth sailing, but sometime, as we know, and we can process in this call today, is that when we go through experiences, some of the greatest learning is from the greatest sorrow. And also, I was talking to a friend today as we were going for a walk, and I said, when you go through a lot of heavy, hard stuff, you can, if you come out of it well, you can actually go up to a higher place of happiness and joy. There's a spectrum there if you work through it.
Yeah, gravity is another word that starts with GR, another heaviness thing, right? But it keeps us on this earth. And grief is one of those things where we feel this heaviness in our lives, and it, in a way, it can keep us on this earth, but man, it feels so negative in a way that some people don't want to be on the earth when that comes up. And so how do you navigate grief? Dr. Robinson, if we were to talk to you on that, what would you say would be the steps that somebody could use to navigate grief?
I think for me, awareness that in that moment that things are not comfortable, and seeking an opportunity to find help. I think sometimes we don't want to share. I've grown in my process of dealing with grief and disappointment by learning how to share with people that I'm very close to, because that sharing enables me to help myself, again, climb out of that dark spot. And because sometimes, in talking with people, they have the same experiences or similar experience that you can connect with. I think being afraid of asking for help when we're down, that can be a detriment in and of itself. So for me, I'm learning how to reach out and say, hey, I need some help with this. Can you help? And not be embarrassed or ashamed about it, because again, having others to support us, that helps us to grow in our giant.
What's interesting is you think of the yoke on an oxen. This is going old school. It's not like we use that anymore. But the idea is you spread out the energy between different animals, and humans. It's the same idea is you spread out when you ask for help, and you're spreading out that heaviness among people, then it makes it lighter. You're not doing it alone.
Correct.
Yeah, I like that. Rachel?
Well, I think too, asking good questions in that struggle, like what is going on? What's really the truth of the thing? Or, because you have to go through the steps and, to feeling what is really going on, to being aware, not putting ourselves in the sand and going, this situation didn't happen, or I'm still fighting and resisting it. And then finding some things that you could learn from it. I think the learning, turning pain to purpose, and then being gratefulness. And of course, Lewis, I love what you said, because Lewis is a good friend of mine, and he's just retired as a principal for how many years now, Lewis?
Wow, 35 years. I've had a lot of help on this journey.
Oh. Well, we were talking yesterday about this topic because we're going to be teaching this in the master class. And Lewis he's going through a little bit of grieving people are asking him for his opinion, and he's not showing up for teacher's advice. It's a little bit of a sadness. So Lewis, share what we were talking about yesterday, because we had to process that, and it's a good thing, but it's a new chapter.
It is. I think going back, short story, 2 years ago when I started to consider where I was in life and professionally, I had to make decisions. And one of those choices was, to consider retirement and moving on to the next chapter in my life. And for me, that was a grieving process, hearing and thinking about it. But sharing and talking with a lot of people and allowing people to, lift me up through the process and said, hey, retirement is not the end of it. It's really the beginning of something new. But I still had to, again, process and think that I'm going to miss all of these wonderful people, and the children are the best part of being an educator to me. I mean, just the giving and the sharing, and being real, feeling important. And so for me, that was the process that I went through in order to get to where I am today. But ultimately making the decision, taking the plunge, and I have no regret at this point.
Yeah, Ryan, what are you thinking around this?
So, like, one thing that came to me, like, as Rachel was talking, is like that you've got to be aware, like, sometimes when something happens to you, like, and you're in this space of denial, right? That you don't want to deal with this. Like, I don't know if sometimes it might be a subconscious thing, and your body isn't ready to deal with it. So you go into like this state of being, it's denial. It's not ready to deal with that. So, and Rachel, you've been through some heavy things. We've been through some heavy things. Like, what do you do when you're something heavy, that grief, like to process the grief? Maybe the question is like, what do you do when something happens that's a big deal? How do you get through that? Like, how do you become aware? How do you start processing? How do you deal with that thing? Because I think our mind tries to keep us safe, and it's like, no, don't go down those emotions. Like, you got to feel some of those emotions, and sometimes we think, well, we got to be strong. I gotta be this certain way for somebody, or these expectations. But how did you deal with the heaviness of it all?
Oh, I'll just go first, but I think it's a process of a lifetime. And that's part of the path of learning how to be a giant, or to being the best we can be. We don't start out learning that way. We start when we're younger, learning that to be modeled in school, or our parents saying, don't you cry, stuff your emotions. And then as we grow into that personal development, hopefully that's kind of where I got it, was I want to be a better person and navigate these emotions. And I have a choice. I either can lay down low, and I need to process the grief. I had a husband pass away. I had my youngest daughter just got married. So I have 4 daughters. And it's like, I started feeling like a little bit lonely. I go, they all don't need me anymore. So it's a new phase. But if I had not known in the years past of how to deal with these emotions, and first you cry it out. I think crying is good. And then journal writing. I love to process what I'm feeling in my emotions, because things come out that I didn't realize that I had felt. And seeing it there, or like Dr. Robinson talking to a friend and go, you may want to, that didn't sound right when it came out. And then it's a process of just, you don't want to, some things you can put in a box, but don't lock it. Yeah. Sometimes there's a time where you can grieve partially. When my husband passed away, I had to, get in the robotic mode, and I get kids ready for school and get ready kids off for college. And then there's phases where I had to sit down and maybe go to a course, or, get a weekend of just really getting clear of it. Hurt. It is not fun. And then start being grateful. and then learning what the good came out of it, and then turning it to maybe help other people deal with the same thing, and then it can be a U-turn for.
I want to hit on something that's coming up, is the listening, right? When we hear listening, we think, oh, I heard you, right? But there's a way of listening. The way that we listen is based on our perception. So if we look at somebody that's grieving and we're feeling like, get over it, then we're going to listen from that space of get over it, right? And then, so as they share things with us, there's not going to be any empathy inside of that listening. And same thing, if we're sharing with somebody and they've got that same energy, then we're going to have a hard time sharing that because of their way of listening. And so being in a space where you can listen, right? But listen fully empathetically, where you can feel that energy, because it might be a death. It might be a loss of a job. It might be that something didn't turn out the way that you wanted. So there's grief inside of that. A relationship, it could be anything. So anytime there's heaviness, you're going to go through this process. Dr. Robinson, what's coming up as you hear that?
Yeah, I tell you, that's spot on, the listening part. In the years of working with children and adults, and in the career and also in the personal world, one of the things that I think we miss is the listen. We don't listen for understanding. We listen, we want to hear, but we don't listen for internalizing, so that we can start with the individual. And I think it's spot on. So I think that's critical in the grief process. Allow people to support them where they are. Again, as long as they're not self-destructive, you got to find ways to help them through those most difficult and vulnerable moments. But at the same time, listening and being slow with giving so much advice. Sometimes we want to tell them how to fix their grief, but that's right. Really not the listener's role.
Right. Man, that's what we have a tendency to do. What we're talking about really is resiliency. How quickly can you process through the grieving process? So they say there are 5 stages. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then the last one is acceptance. But then Susan Anderson talks about it from the space of shattering. Your life is shattered. You withdraw, you internalize, you get angry, and then you lift. And so the quicker we can process through that, the quicker we can get back to our lives and get into creating again. But you can't deny grief. You can't just bury it and not go through those steps. For some people, it might take years. For others, it might take months and days. And so honoring that process and working to move through it, that's resiliency. And that's kind of what we're needing.
I like the realness of Rachel said, hurt is not fun. It isn't fun to get hurt. If you feel like excitement from getting hurt, then you may need to talk to a therapist. But I like what she said about the thought process.
Yeah.
The reflection. What good can come from this experience? What can I learn from it? It's expansive thinking. It's the possibilities of finding healing or moving into the healing stage, I guess. It's, at least to me, that's what it speaks to. Like I thought, wow, yes, like this happened. This is the acceptance of what is. It is what it is. This happened, and that can be hard. That's the hurt. That can be the painful, the feelings, the emotions that can come up. But then moving into, what can I learn from this experience? Where can I go from here? How can I move through this? Who can I talk to that can help? That can give me the tools that I need. Man, that just was a powerful, like aha moment for me, Rachel. I made nothing more than that. Just.
Well, Ryan, and I think words have power because we have thoughts. They're just thoughts that spin out, and all of us is this chattering, thinking brain. Our brain are meant to think, but we have emotions that can come out of that, and words can change the way we feel. We're not a little doll that gets spun around. We can be, and lots where unhappiness happens if we let our mind just whip us around and go, well, somebody doesn't like me, or I don't have nothing important to say, and these untruths that we make a story in our head. And I think, Nick, you mentioned that. But when I think, and I help too in my life, because I would never be good at coaching or in wellness or whatever if I didn't know how to process this through my life. But when I go, I'm feeling sad, then I go, well, how do I want to feel? Okay, well, first, sad is there's some rights to feel sad, and this is what I'm feeling sad about. But what do I want to feel? And what's the opposite of sad? Well, happy. I choose to feel happy today. I can't change this. I can change this. And what I do today. And so you have to learn to talk to yourself a lot, to the person upstairs. That's the most important job of. And then we can change how we move forward with decisions and actions. And then, of course, serving others, like we're all about, helping others navigate those emotions.
I hear another thing inside of that too is forgiveness work, right? Because there's this idea that if somebody else has caused harm, there's this idea of causing harm back and going back and forth. And this is what happens is nobody lays down the sword. So there's this causing additional pain. And one of the best definitions I heard around forgiveness was to not cause additional pain or harm, right? To let that go. And sometimes in the past, some of the pain of the past is forgiving what is. Letting go isn't so much about forgetting and letting something just go past. It's more about embracing what is. I look at Angie Barnett. I use her as an example often because she talks about being homesick about losing her leg. She misses her leg. And she's got this homesickness. And then on the flip side, she's got this embracing of what is. That leg is not coming back. And so there's this embracing. And can we talk about that a little bit? Embracing and forgiving?
Yeah, I think it's very important in the process in terms of forgiveness and making sure that we understand that there's a level of trust that you have to, of course, establish and maintain. When that trust is broken, how do you fix that? We tend to, of course, the natural, I think, tendency is to disassociate oneself with the individual or whatever the issue may be. But I think in order to mend that, it starts with acknowledging the fact that, I violated that trust between you and I. Acknowledging that, making sure that, number one, you have to acknowledge that, I did a wrong. And so many times, we don't do that. And I think when it starts with that, then you have to allow time to regain and to rebuild that trust as well. So it's a critical piece in growth and development. Again, acknowledgement of the wrong, giving the individual time. It's okay for you to be. I can't tell you how to forgive me for something I did. I can't. So many times we step in that light. That's not my light. My light is to make sure you understand that I acknowledge my wrong, I accept it, and I embrace your response to that. Whether in the moment you don't want to talk to me or whatever, I need to embrace that because I'm the one that violated that wrong.
Holy cow. Yeah, you are talking about some really important things right here. I think in Nassim Nicholas Taleb talks about certainty and the certainty process and how we can count on things after we've experienced them a certain number of times. We can start to say with certainty, I can say that this is going to happen because it's happened this way so many times. And trust is one of those things where when it's destroyed, there's this rebuilding that has to occur because there's an uncertainty around how you're going to show up, your integrity with your word or how you do things. And so giving space for that, knowing that if you're the one that violated, that you're going to have to build back that certainty in your word, that integrity in your word, that, oh yeah, you know what? I used to not be able to trust Nick, but now after experiencing him, I know that I can trust Nick, right? It's this integrity with your word. It's getting back into that space of I can count on what you're going to say or do. I think that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way, of rebuilding that trust as regaining certainty around your word. I mean, that sounds like a powerful view, Dr. Robinson. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I think to play off that too is that we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. And so as we change, we get better, hopefully, at dealing with the grieving process. Because when you're young, it's one, a breakup for a young kid is a big deal, or not getting into a certain college or whatever. But then as you get older, there's bigger things that can happen. I mean, there's a lot of layers to the grieving process. But then as we learn to feel it, see it differently, then we can respond differently. And I have, I'll just share this. I mean, I had a problem forgiving my dad for some things that happened in my life. And it took me a lot of years to process it. And I just started thinking about he did the best he could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I go, like, give him a break. You know, he did the best he could.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, what did he do well? And what can I do better? And honoring our lives. So then it made me feel so much better that I wasn't holding this rattlesnake, you know?
Yeah. Do you notice the story change though? There's a story change within you. It had to occur within you. You had a narrative of your dad that he was this way. And then the narrative changed to, well, he did the best he could. So you started telling a new story. And the moment you started telling that new story, your perception about him shifted. And then your behavior around him shifted. And so that story is so vital because we are story writing, reading, creating animals. If I call us animals, I hate to do that, humans. Even going back 25,000 years BC, I think the story of Gilgamesh was the first written story. But prior to that, they told stories around fires, families. There were stories that were passed down. And so we operate from story. And so this idea that you shifted that story around what your grief meant, around what this experience meant. And that changed everything. Dr. Robinson, what's coming up as you're hearing that? I see your face just going.
She mentioned forgiveness. I think for me, it's the trust part. I'm a softie on the inside, so forgiving an individual, I don't struggle with that as much as I struggle with the trust, because the letdown to me hurts really bad. And I struggle with getting over that, and especially if I'm going to be seeing this individual and working with this individual over time, I have to really work hard to trust the fact that they meant what they said in terms of forgiving, asking for forgiveness. Hey, let's start this thing over and move forward. That's just been a struggle for me because of the letdown factor. And I'm guilty. I've let people down, as well. But I try to be conscious and aware of the fact that, where I stumbled before, I don't make that same mistake again with that individual. I try to make sure that through awareness and communication and just being open, I think Ryan said it, the rawness of being, I think that's important to be able to talk with an individual and open up, making sure the lines of communication is open and just being very honest and transparent about it. Then I think the trust factor, it improves over time. Forgiveness, I think, and I kind of look at, the fact that, I'm sorry, I'm a flawed individual, and so if I'm asking for forgiveness, then I need to make sure that I receive that forgiveness as well.
Yeah, to not cause additional harm. I mean, somebody could, give that, and then you could cause additional harm by not receiving it in a way. And it is an individual choice. I think of the word grudge. The word grudge is to hold on to something. And the reason we do it, it also comes from that, that GR root, that heaviness root. We hang on to it because there's a memory of some pain. And so we remember that there was pain created with this person that might be a trigger in the environment. And so we are just simply trying to protect ourselves. So that's where the grudge comes in. Letting go of that grudge might be the biggest challenge people face. Just like grief, it's one of those things where a letting go is embracing, look, it is what it is. And here this person is changing, I'm changing, the story is changing, the narrative. And so letting go of that grudge, forgiving, the judgment is all you have.
That could be forgiving ourselves, right? That we've talked about too. Like that's a big thing when you're going through that grieving process, is allowing yourself space. Some of our programming, from our earliest years, we talked about this a little bit, but it's so heavy because we've believed that. We've told that story our whole lives. I've 30 plus years of telling myself a story of and it served me at a time because it was protecting me. But as an adult, it starts to cause problems. There's a space where I realized that what it was doing, the story that I was telling myself, and then there's a grieving process of wow, and almost like like a guilt or a self shame. I don't know how to describe it. Like a regret that, oh my gosh, now that I'm aware of this, why didn't I change this sooner? Like what? Like, man, so simple. Now that I'm aware of it, now I can see it. But man, I'm sad for the last however many years that I didn't make a choice or a change sooner inside of that. But now allowing myself the grace, going, okay, Ryan, you knew what you knew and you did what you did, but how are you going to move through this now? What do you do now? From now, that's the only time that you can change is right now. You have the power and the control. So what do you do with it? That knowledge, but stop beating yourself up about it too, because we do that, right, as humans.
I think that's one of the biggest parts is we have to start with ourselves. We have to realize we have strength within us. And I remember if you're a drive by a car dealer and they have the balloon that kind of waves in. And I heard a story once when a man was talking to his little son and he goes, how come, Daddy, how come that little man keeps coming back up? He goes, because he has something strong inside him. Something inside of us.
That's funny.
That we can be able to stand strong and have compassion. We're doing the best we can. We're little kids growing up, and to be able to forgive ourselves. And then I think Dr. Robinson, communication. When I asked if I'm helping somebody, as I'm a coach in this way, is say, help me understand what you meant by that, because words mean different. And my youngest daughter just married Isai, and he's from Peru. So words he says may mean totally different. Help me understand. We don't all take it, the story that we make it to be, or maybe the tone that it was given. Just we're different. Help me understand what that meant to you. And let's see if we can communicate this with ourselves or with the other person.
I think it's important. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Robinson. I'll jump in after.
Well, I was just going to chime in on what Rachel, her last comment, the communicating piece again. And I think I said this earlier, I don't want to be redundant, but, I learned this over the years, again, we listen for hearing and we don't listen for understanding. I think that is the real key there, even with that story, that model that Ryan used, which is excellent. But again, it's really listening for understanding. I think that's key.
Yeah, part of the Giants' journey, that grief is a vital step that we didn't realize was there until we had an interview with somebody on one of our shows, and it came up. And I think it was Julie Wheeler that brought that up. And hearing it, I'm like, wow, that is a step that's necessary, because we don't want to feel our feels. We don't want to feel that down feeling. We think where we are, we shouldn't be there. And it's, a good coach of ours, Townsend Wardlaw, he says that it's your relationship with your story that you struggle with. Mm-hmm. It's not the thing that's going on. It's how you're relating to it. Your idea that it shouldn't be there. Well, it is there, and part of grieving, like you said, cry it out. Crying is very important. Your body is designed to cry for a reason. To stop that limits your body from doing what it's designed to do. You have a parasympathetic nervous system that's designed to get you back into balance. And so eliminating crying is one of the ways that keeps you from getting there. So you allow yourself space to cry, allow yourself space, in the animal world, they shake when there's trauma. They shake it off. And humans, we don't do that.
I had a session yesterday with Carrie Tomich, and she went through some things with me, and I didn't expect the emotion that came up, the tears of when I had the understanding of, oh my gosh, this is the root, and that I was doing a certain thing. I was doing a certain thing to protect my parents, and I won't go into a whole bunch of details on it, from judgment of others, because of my actions. I didn't want them to be judged. That was a big part of what we discovered. And I started to cry because I realized that's not on me in the judgment. And it was, and I started to shake. I was in the parking lot of Shields, like an outdoor sporting goods store in the parking lot, full grown dude, right? Just like crying. And she told me, that's perfect. Don't hold it back. It's okay. And as a belief that had been ingrained in me that we don't cry, we're men, we're strong. You don't need to feel those emotions. I had to let that go, and I'm a big softie anyway too. Dr. Robinson. I mean, geez, like I melt inside. I have this like Eminem,
Okay. All right,
like
brother.
exterior, and then
Okay.
inside I just
I thought of Men in Tights, Robin
yeah,
Hood. We're
yes,
men. We're
yeah,
men
we're
in
men in
tights.
tight,
Tight.
We're good. Ryan, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I'm going to ask you guys to forgive me. A few years ago, someone gave me a book by Brene Brown. There was a quote in there, and I wish I'm going to botch this up, but I got to share it. And it goes along with your story. Basically, she said that when we own our own story and walk in it, here's the kicker: we get the right ending. Your ending now that you're writing is not what the story is all about, but it's about your ending. Something to that effect. And I always remember that little quote. I can't remember the book, because it's been a while back. But it really is important to own our own story, walk in it. But the thing is that you get to write the ending.
Yeah, I like the
To me, that's
Dr.
powerful.
Robinson version better. I thought that was better
Well,
than
no. I'm not in her league, so no
Yeah.
way. That's a faulty interpretation of what was in the quote in her book. But that stuck with me.
Yeah, the beauty of this whole program is and we're going 30 minutes here. We could go hours and hours on each of these topics. You could go weeks and months on a single topic. And so the master class that's coming up is going to touch on this, but that's why we have a follow-up course behind it. For the teachers, because this is an ongoing lesson. It's not something that you just teach once and you're done. And so, as we wrap up here, what final thoughts do you have around grief and its importance in growing? And I kind of primed you there to go a certain direction, but
I'll just do it now. Dr. Robinson, you can go. But for me in my life, I've been able to process things with grief and resiliency and acceptance is because I've taken courses. I've delved into the personal growth arena, and that's what we're pouring into as this tribe and League of Giants is to help everyone be their best. And it's processing. And then when you have a master class, many people voicing opinions, you have a chance to process and journaling and the good questions. You're able to accelerate your joy in going through all these struggles and also being able to celebrate the good.
That's awesome.
Well, I think I sort of learned this on the run, on the job training, so to speak, meaning in life, how to deal with certain disappointments and grief. Just a short story. Probably the biggest thing that stuck out in my mind in terms of grief is that I happened to be fortunate enough to be in the room with my mother when she passed, and I was the only one in the room with her, which is very, very difficult. And there were other people in my life that have passed away, my dad after her. But I've learned over time is accepting that moment for me is critical. But also from that moment, and I think someone said it earlier, you learn from it. And I receive strength from that moment every time I run across or come into something that's difficult in my life. And I think back, if I can get through that, then I can get through this. As long as I'm breathing, I can get through it. I've got to acknowledge that it hurts. I've got to reach out to somebody that can help me, my spouse or my children, my adult children. I'm loving them now. When they were little, I don't know, we didn't get along very well. But now we can have real raw conversations like we did this weekend on the beach and walk away still loving each other, but still having some grief about some of the challenges that we face in our adult life and in our family and in our surroundings, but helping each other to get through that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was perfect. Yeah. Ryan, did you have some additional thoughts?
Just quick is that yes, and I agree with all those things, and I've heard it said that there's growth inside of pain or on the other side of pain or on the other side of difficult circumstances or situations. There's lessons to be learned. We can use those experiences. Now it's easier just to say it just like that. And it's through that, hurt is not fun. There's a lot to this. But if you listen to what Dr. Robinson and Dr. Smart said through this episode, there is healing, there is growth, there can be joy again. You can feel those different emotions. There's so much waiting for you as you grow into your giant potential. And this is part of the journey. And your journey might look a little different than all of ours, but there is hope. There is so much good to life, and you have so much to offer if you'll take that on and go through these steps that we've talked about today. So go be giant.
If you haven't done this yet, if you're not registered for the course, it's only $19.97. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous price for the value you're going to get. So beyond the value. GiantCreationAcademy.com. Go register today for the event because we're going to talk about this more in detail and other things. And we appreciate you being part of the Tribe of Giants and the League of Giants and Wake Up with Giants and everything else that we're doing. Go make it a giant day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Love you too.